Have you ever witnessed someone being humiliated simply because of the color of their skin? That gut-wrenching moment when dignity is stripped away in public, not for anything they've done wrong, but for simply existing in a space where others believe they don't belong. Today's story will make your blood boil. A black single father and his 7-year-old daughter, excited for their first-class flight and her first glimpse of the ocean, instead faced blatant discrimination that escalated into one of the most shocking examples of racism in the airline industry. But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Within just 8 minutes of their unjust removal from that plane, the tables dramatically turned. An entire cabin crew lost their jobs. A major airline faced a PR catastrophe. And it all happened because one passenger refused to stay silent. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew something was wrong, but didn't know whether to speak up? Maybe you've witnessed discrimination, but weren't sure if it was your place to intervene. Or perhaps you've been on the receiving end, feeling that sick, hollow sensation as others watched your humiliation without saying a word. In either case, this story will resonate deeply with you. Because when Kaelen Vance and his daughter Zora boarded that first-class cabin, they had no idea they were about to become the center of a viral incident that would expose the ugly reality many black travelers face every day. What started with a flight attendant's double check of a perfectly valid boarding pass ended with an entire airline crew fired and a corporation scrambling to contain the damage. But the most powerful moment happened not in the boardroom, but in a quiet hotel room between a father and daughter. Before we dive into this powerful story, take a moment to hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of race. Drop a comment below sharing whether you've ever witnessed discrimination while traveling. Your experiences matter, and this community is stronger when we share them. Kaelen Vance, a 38-year-old software architect and single father, had worked countless late nights and sacrificed countless weekends to reach this moment. Seated in the plush first-class cabin of Flight 832 from Phoenix to New York, in seats 2A and 2B, he watched his 7-year-old daughter Zora press her face against the thick window, her breath fogging a small circle on the pane. This trip wasn't just a vacation, it was a promise fulfilled. A celebration of Kaelen's recent promotion and, for little Zora, her very first glimpse of the ocean. The wide, comfortable seats weren't merely a luxury. They represented tangible proof of his success against the odds, navigating both single parenthood and the demanding tech industry with quiet determination. "Daddy, we're so high up," Zora whispered, her eyes wide with wonder as she traced cloud shapes with her small finger against the window. The first-class cabin hummed with unspoken social codes. Passengers moved with practiced ease, stowing designer carry-ons and settling into their seats with quiet confidence. The service was deferential, almost invisible, a world designed for comfort and exclusivity. Then came Brenda, a flight attendant with blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. She moved through the aisle with a practiced smile, sharing warm interactions with other passengers, a laugh with the businessmen in 3C, a solicitous inquiry to the woman in 1A. But when her eyes fell on Kaelen and Zora, something changed. It was subtle, a momentary tightening at the corners of her mouth, a glance that lingered a fraction too long. That familiar look of assessment, the silent question, "Do you belong here?" Kaelen had felt that look before, in boardrooms, at parent-teacher conferences, in high-end stores. He met her gaze briefly, offered a polite nod, and turned his attention back to Zora. This was their moment, and he refused to let anyone's judgment diminish it. The boarding process continued smoothly until Brenda made her way back up the aisle, her focus landing squarely on Kaelen. "Sir," she began, her voice professionally level but lacking the warmth she had offered others, "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass again." Kaelen looked up from his phone where he'd been showing Zora their flight path. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his tone even. "We just have to double-check the manifest," Brenda replied, avoiding his eyes. "Sometimes there are mix-ups with seating assignments." The explanation seemed plausible, except for one glaring detail. She hadn't asked anyone else to re-verify their right to be there. Not the man in 3C, not the woman in 1A. Only him. This wasn't a random audit. It was a targeted inquiry. Kaelen felt that familiar tightening in his chest, the physical response to being singled out. For Zora's sake, he maintained his composure, calmly unlocking his phone and pulling up the digital boarding pass. Brenda glanced at the screen, her expression suggesting she had expected, perhaps even hoped, to find an error. Finding none, frustration flickered across her face before vanishing behind her professional mask. "It's just that we occasionally have passengers who wander into the wrong cabin," she added, the implication hanging in the air like ice. Kaelen didn't rise to the bait. He simply held her gaze for a beat longer than comfortable, not aggressive, but a silent, powerful statement of self-possession. He was a man who knew he belonged, and his refusal to be flustered seemed to unnerve her more than any angry outburst would have. In that moment, Kaelen's calm defiance became, in Brenda's eyes, a challenge to her authority. She turned sharply and retreated toward the galley, her mission to find a procedural error thwarted. But the incident wasn't over. In the cramped confines of the forward galley, hidden from passenger view, the conflict grew. Brenda spoke in hushed, urgent tones to another crew member before approaching the captain. She didn't report Kaelen for any specific violation like being intoxicated or disruptive. Instead, she chose something more insidious and strategically vicious: a complaint about an unidentified passenger's body odor. This accusation was calculated malice. It played on vile stereotypes while remaining conveniently vague. To disguise her personal vendetta against Kaelen, she gestured vaguely toward the front of the cabin, effectively implicating the only two black men in first class, Kaelen and a quiet businessman in row 4 who had done nothing but read financial reports since boarding. The intercom crackled to life with the captain's voice, calm and authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We are experiencing a minor cabin issue and will be returning to the gate to have it resolved. We appreciate your patience." A collective groan rippled through the passengers. Whispers erupted. Kaelen felt a cold, sinking dread. He knew, with sickening certainty, that he and his daughter were the cabin issue. He looked at Zora, now staring at him with furrowed brows and confusion in her eyes. The public nature of this humiliation was the cruelest part. He was being judged by a plain load of strangers for an offense that was not only false, but hadn't even been spoken to him directly. The quiet privilege of the cabin had evaporated, replaced by a thick, suffocating atmosphere of suspicion. The plane docked with a gentle bump that felt to Kaelen like a final judgment. Soon, a ground agent with a clipboard boarded, walking directly to Kaelen's row before motioning to the black businessman in row 4 as well. "Gentlemen," the agent said, his voice low and emotionless, "I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and come with me." No explanation, no apology, just a cold procedural command. The cabin fell silent, whispers replaced by open, curious stares. Some faces held sympathy, others annoyance at the delay, a few with cold suspicion, minds already filling gaps with prejudiced assumptions. "Daddy, where are we going?" Zora asked, her small voice cutting through the silence. "Did we do something wrong?" The question pierced Kaelen's heart. He was trapped between rage, humiliation, and the overwhelming paternal instinct to protect his child from casual cruelty. "No, sweetie," he whispered, his voice thick with controlled emotion. "We didn't do anything wrong at all. We just have to switch planes." A necessary lie. The walk down the aisle felt endless. Every eye followed them. A walk of shame for an offense never committed. Once on the jet bridge, away from prying eyes, Kaelen turned to the agent. "I want an explanation. Why were we removed from that flight?" The agent shifted uncomfortably. "There was a complaint from a crew member about an odor." The word hung in the sterile air. Kaelen felt a bitter laugh rise in his throat. "An odor? And you decided to remove every black man from the first-class cabin? Is that your policy?" He looked the agent directly in the eye. "You kicked us off that plane because we're black." In a moment of stunning honesty, the agent's professional facade crumbled. He looked down at his clipboard, then back at Kaelen. "I agree," he said softly. "I agree. If you've ever witnessed discrimination and stayed silent, ask yourself, what would you have done on that plane? Would you have spoken up?" Type, "I would speak up" in the comments if you believe in standing against injustice, even when it's uncomfortable. What Brenda and the crew of Flight 832 never considered was the new architecture of accountability that exists in our connected world. In Seat 1A, a young tech entrepreneur who had witnessed the initial confrontation had done what has become a modern reflex when facing injustice. She recorded it all. As soon as the plane pushed back from the gate for the second time, leaving Kaelen and the other man behind, she uploaded the 45-second clip to social media. Her caption was simple, yet devastating. Flight attendant humiliates black father and his little girl, forces them off plane after he proves he belongs in his first-class seat. This is at airline name. The 8 minutes, referenced in headlines, isn't about slow institutional justice. It's about the speed of digital wildfire. The video didn't just accumulate views, it detonated online. Within minutes, thousands had seen it. Within half an hour, it crossed 1 million views. Major news outlets picked up the story, and the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack began trending nationwide. The airline's corporate communications team was completely unprepared. Their standard, pre-packaged response about taking claims of discrimination seriously was immediately drowned in a tidal wave of public fury. The narrative was no longer theirs to control. As Flight 832 continued toward New York, other passengers with in-flight Wi-Fi began posting their own accounts, corroborating the video and adding new details. One passenger wrote, "They removed the only 2 black men in first class over some made-up complaint. The little girl was in tears. Absolutely disgusting." Meanwhile, Kaelen and Zora had been placed in an airport hotel. Within 2 hours of the incident, a prominent civil rights attorney who had seen the viral video contacted Kaelen, offering to represent him pro bono. The financial and legal threat to the airline escalated dramatically with each passing hour. By the 3-hour mark, as Flight 832 prepared to land in New York, airline executives were in full crisis mode. Emergency meetings were called. The CEO was briefed. The stock price began to slip as Boycott Airline trended alongside the original video. This digital justice system bypassed the traditional corporate complaint processes. No customer service queue, no he said, she said dispute easily dismissed. The phone in Seat 1A had served as an objective, unimpeachable witness, taking the case directly to the court of public opinion. If you're watching this video right now, you hold similar power in your hands. Your phone is a tool for accountability. Have you ever used your camera to document injustice? Drop a comment below sharing how documentation can be our most powerful weapon against discrimination. When Flight 832 touched down at JFK, the crew wasn't greeted with the usual routine. Instead, grim-faced airline executives waited on the jet bridge. The story had become the lead item on national news websites. Celebrities were sharing the video. Politicians were issuing statements. The airline, facing a full-blown brand crisis and an inevitable high-profile lawsuit, had no choice but to act decisively. 4 hours after the initial incident, the airline CEO issued a public statement that was anything but standard corporate damage control. "Today, we failed our customers in the most fundamental way possible. The treatment of Mr. Vance and his daughter, as well as another passenger on Flight 832, was reprehensible and does not reflect our values. We have suspended the entire cabin crew pending termination proceedings, effective immediately." The statement continued with a personal apology to Kaelen and his daughter, along with an offer of compensation that industry analysts described as unprecedented. But more telling was what happened next. The airline announced a comprehensive review of its training protocols and the establishment of an independent diversity advisory board with actual decision-making power. These actions weren't born from an internal moral compass. They were forced by the sheer, overwhelming pressure of public visibility. Without the video evidence, Kaelen's experience might have become just another ignored complaint, filed away and forgotten. Instead, it became a watershed moment for the airline industry. Other carriers, watching the fallout, began preemptively reviewing their own procedures. Flight attendant unions issued statements condemning discrimination and promising enhanced cultural sensitivity training. Consumer advocacy groups called for industry-wide standards for handling discrimination complaints. The crew members themselves faced not just job loss but public identification. Their names and faces circulated online, their past behavior scrutinized. While some debated the ethics of this digital exposure, Others pointed out that accountability sometimes requires a spotlight. For the airline, the financial impact was immediate and severe. Stock price drops, cancellations, and a settlement with Kaelen that industry insiders estimated in the high six figures. But the reputational damage, that would take years to repair. This swift justice demonstrated a fundamental truth about accountability in the digital age. Power has shifted. When everyone carries a camera, injustice that once happened in shadows now faces the glare of global attention. In the quiet of their hotel room that night, the television played footage of Kaelen's face captured in a still from the viral video. Beside him on the bed, Zora was uncharacteristically quiet, her small body curled into a ball. She was too young to understand racial bias, but old enough to sense the weight of the day's events, the tension in her father's shoulders, the sadness in his eyes. Kaelen turned off the television and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling Zora into his lap. He knew this conversation would be one of the most important of her life. You know how sometimes in stories, there are characters who are mean or scared? He began softly. Zora nodded against his chest. Well, some people in the real world are like that too, he continued, choosing each word carefully. They have a kind of darkness inside them that makes them afraid of things they don't understand. It makes them afraid of people who look different from them. He paused, stroking her hair. That lady on the plane, her darkness made her act ugly. It made her say and do mean things. But her darkness has nothing to do with our light. You and me, he said, tilting her chin up so their eyes met, we shine. We belong wherever we want to be. In any seat, in any room. Never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong in the sun. This quiet moment represented the true change happening. Not in corporate boardrooms or press releases, but in the transfer of resilience from one generation to the next. Kaelen was transforming a moment of public humiliation into a foundational lesson about inherent worth and dignity. Later that night, after Zora fell asleep, Kaelen stood by the window, looking at the city lights. The anger remained, a hot coal in his gut, but beneath it grew something else. A renewed purpose. He hadn't sought this fight, but he would see it through, not just for himself, but for the countless other travelers whose similar experiences were never captured on video, whose dignity was stripped away in quiet, unrecorded moments. The victory wasn't the fired crew or the pending settlement. The victory was Zora, sleeping peacefully, armed with a lesson her father had paid a high price to teach her. Know your worth, stand your ground, and never let anyone dim your light. The most important journey wasn't to New York, but the one they would continue together, stronger and more certain than before of their right to exist freely in this world. Kaelen and Zora's story isn't just about one flight attendant or one airline. It's about the choices we all make when confronted with injustice. Every day in spaces both public and private, people face discrimination that goes unchallenged and undocumented. The passenger in seat 1A made a choice that day. She could have remained silent, looked away, or whispered about it later to friends. Instead, she chose to act, creating accountability through documentation. Her 45 seconds of footage changed lives and possibly an entire industry. This is the power we all hold. Our phones aren't just communication devices, they're tools for justice. When we witness discrimination, recording creates an objective record that cuts through denial and forces recognition of reality. It transforms your word against mine into irrefutable evidence. But documentation is only the first step. Sharing these truths, amplifying voices that might otherwise be silenced, completes the circuit of accountability. The executives who fired that cabin crew didn't do so because of a moral awakening. They did it because thousands of people like you refused to look away. This channel exists to shine light on these stories, not to feed outrage, but to create change. To show that racism isn't abstract. It happens to real people with real lives, dreams, and children who ask heartbreaking questions when they're forced off planes. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button to support our mission of illuminating these crucial narratives. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what flying while black truly means. Leave a comment about how you'll use your power to document and challenge discrimination when you witness it. Because ultimately, justice isn't just delivered in courtrooms or corporate boardrooms, It's created by ordinary people who refuse to be silent bystanders. What will you do the next time you witness someone's dignity being violated? Your answer matters more than you know.